Welcome to the Association 4.0 podcast, your association's no-fluff playbook to navigating and thriving in Industry 4.0 or the digital marketplace. Each week, we bring expert insights to help you and your association stay ahead of the curve.
Welcome to the Association 4.0 podcast. I'm Sherry Budziak, CEO and founder of orgSource and the host of today's podcast. Today, I have the honor of talking with Bill Bruce, CEO of the American College of Occupational Environmental Medicine, about resilient leadership and how he has led ACOEM to be positioned for success during the pandemic. And we will gain insights on his views of the future for associations. So welcome, Bill. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Sherry. It's good. I'm glad to be here and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Great. I'm curious, Bill, how has the pandemic experience changed your thoughts about the future of the association industry?
Yeah, well, I think that differs depending on the kind of association that you're in. And I'll speak first sort of about our organization. For our organization, ironically, I think the pandemic was a blessing in disguise. It was a clarion call for our members to wake up and to become more active and more visible and to address some of the issues that occupational medicine is facing that a lot of other organizations maybe aren't. And I think medical societies out there in general all felt varying degrees of this same call to action, the same import. And I hope a number of them are seeing some way to have found benefit over the past year or so. If I step aside a little bit and think about organizations that maybe aren't in care delivery in any shape or form, I imagine those organizations are really having to rethink what their value model is, how they get in touch with people. They're to a lesser extent, they're having to solve for the same problems that we had to solve for very quickly as a medical organization. And I think now what we're seeing is an unknown about what is the future of work. That's not going to be unique to associations, but it's something that we're going to be affected by. And it's going to change everything about the way we think about what is the workplace and how do we as an association, as the staff of an association, guide our organizations to deliver value, and how has that value proposition changed in the past year? Right now, I think we're mostly guessing still. Things haven't settled, but I'm sure that we're not going to get to a point that things are just like they were a year and a half ago. I don't think that's ever going to happen again. I think that the world is forever changed as a result of this, because it has forced us to rip the Band-Aid off of so many of our customs that we thought were non-negotiable before, and suddenly they didn't matter almost overnight for a lot of us. And getting things done and being connected with people had to begin to happen through different means. And one thing that I think is really important for my more extroverted colleagues to recognize is that you got a lot more productivity out of your introverts over the past year than you ever have before. And they're not the ones that are making noise about how exhausting it is to go to the office every day, but they're the ones that totally blew you away over the past year and what they could do from home. And because they don't get their energy from being in a room, having people talk loudly around them, they get their energy from being able to focus and put their head down and really get through some stuff. And so it has been, in a way, 2020 was the year of the introvert, which I've kind of appreciated. I mean, I've always been an introvert, and I think I've always been good at compensating for being an introvert, which is a skill that you have to have if you want to ascend in your profession. Because extroverts kind of make all the rules normally. And, but this year, I think all of those rules that were designed to make extroverts comfortable and productive in the workplace were thrown out. And that was an opportunity for us to see the different types of work and the different ways that people can get things done and be differently productive. On the other hand, a lot of my extrovert friends gosh, I feel for them because they're struggling. They're having a really hard time. One of my best employees um, has a very hard time with not having human exposure, and she because the energy is just not there for her.
Mhm.
So it's been a rough year, but anyway, I think as we look forward, I'm hoping that we are able to find a new balance of all of these different things and sort of reset what we think the workplace is and what that means to the people in it and how we bring people together, both on the staff side and on the value delivery side for our organizations.
Yeah, it's been interesting, Bill, because as you know, through our other company, .org community, we run meetings, and the people that were very engaged with our virtual meetings are ones that we were always begged to come to our in-person meetings. And they
Yeah,
said, they're like, we love this format because I'm an introvert. And it was interesting because behind the screen, they were the most outgoing during those meetings. So it was just very interesting. And for myself, I presented in person at WSAE a couple days ago, and I'm not an introvert, and I was so excited. I was like, yes, I'm in a room with people. This is so
right.
exciting. And you're right, it gave me a different energy than presenting behind the screen. So it's been that dynamics has been very interesting. I think a learning experience for all of us, and over this last year.
Yeah,
But
I think going, looking forward, we're trying to balance this. We're trying to find the right sort of the right mix of expectations to set for staff, and my ops team and I just discussed yesterday what we were going to do in terms of, well, when are we going to require people to come back to the office? And um, at the end of the conversation, we arrived at, we're probably not going to require people to come back to the office. We're going to welcome people who want to come back to the office. And we may add to that an expectation that certain staff meetings and team meetings will be in person. But outside of those meetings where there is clearly value in being able to share the same space with your coworkers, um, how they get the productive part of their day done, we're going to leave to them to make the best decisions. And as long as we're managing around their strengths and abilities and doing that, everything is going to be fine.
yeah, that's great. I know that's a big conversation that people have going on right now, and there's definitely different views, and I think that's a great approach. So, Bill, let me ask you, like, what do you see are the challenges, or what do you think is kind of the next disruption that you see for associations?
Wow. I think, well, if we think about the past year, the next real disruption is going to be, um, well, I think it sort of builds on the previous points, which is how do we re-engage people who sort of fell by the wayside over the past year? And how do we retain the people who were able to shine in our organizations for the past year? And reimagine what that means from how we represent a profession all together. Um, I think the next big disruption is likely to be somehow related to the generational progression as the last of the boomer generation retires, and the beginning of the Gen Xers start to step out of the way. We're going to see the millennials and Gen Zs and Gen Ys, and I forget the alphabet of new generations and how we're referring to them, but we're going to see the younger workforce sort of step out into the forefront. And what's interesting that if you're looking around now, you'll see a good number of that younger workforce is almost refusing to go back to a 45 hour work week in an office kind of work scenario. They're just, it's like they're not having it. And so I think operationally, there's immediately a disruption and a culture conflict around organizations that are invested into work happening at a place rather than work happening around an idea. And one great example of this that was kind of surprising was I saw a story just this week about the engineers at Apple who were flatly refusing to return to what is arguably the most beautiful workplace in the world
Right.
because they'd rather work at home. And and even as an introvert, I was looking at that thinking, if I had the opportunity to go to that building every day, it'd be hard not to, because it embraces all of these different work styles, and they've attempted to build it out as a way that um, everybody could feel home and be productive based on their own individual needs. There's downsides to that design and that approach, which I'm aware of, but um, what we're seeing though is that a good number of people now realize that they are more productive and more rewarded by having a different arrangement for how they get work done. And for organizations we're looking to the day in mid 2021 when everybody is vaccinated and everything is open back up and great, now I can have everybody start punching the clock at 8 a.m. in my office. They're going to have a rude awakening for how people are going to respond to that. It's going to be very hard, and I think the next year and a half are going to be a real challenging period for people who want to hold on to this old idea of you work in a place, not on a thing. And we'll have to see how that works. And we're attempting to take that head on, like I said previously, with our approach of mixed requirements and flexibility. That and we'll monitor it, and if it works out, we'll talk about it. If it doesn't work, we'll change it and talk about it and see that. But beyond that, I think it does, as a trend, this is going to call attention to the expectations in the workforce of the newer and younger entrants. And as those folks who we always looked to as the next generation behind our generation, as they move into management roles, they're going to bring with them different expectations and in a certain sense of making it their own. And so we're going to see that, just like we do every 10 or 15 years, we're going to see another major shift in office culture and productivity culture that all associations are going to do. I think from a membership standpoint, membership has to be far more value driven than it's ever been. My organization, we're lucky in some ways in that the majority of our membership feels like it's a professional achievement to be a member of the professional organization. Because they're in this profession, they embrace the idea of membership in a society as part of showing that you're a participant in a profession. What that says is the median age of my member is older than me, and growing every single year, because the younger generation does not perceive value in that way for the most part. I mean, there's outliers in both cases, but the younger folks coming into the profession are going to think more about doing math around this, and they're going to think more about how do I advance my professional goals by this relationship to an association. And so it's I think harder to get those folks who are looking at what they can receive from membership directly, and is that is there competition for where they could get those things? If you're looking for a mentor, are there places that somebody could get a mentor that is equally as good outside of your association? If so, I would worry about that. Can people get education and current information outside of your association and what you provide? If so, those are other things to worry about. If what you provide to your members is not unique or have some degree of exclusivity that drives your membership value, I think this generational shift is going to begin to kill off some dinosaur business models in the association world. And so I think everybody's going to have to be much more flexible running associations in the future to survive this tide of retirements and just folks aging out of professions. Some of them will stay on forever. I've got some members that are in their 80s or 90s and are still active and engaged, and participating in virtual events with no trouble at all. But that's kind of you notice it because it's rare.
Yeah.
That's why it stands out, is because for the most part, there are certain stereotypes around age and technology that this past year has shown a very bright light on. And some of those stereotypes were broken down by people's ability to sort of get through it, because it's important for them to be in their profession. And so they closed that gap and realized that those gaps weren't as big as they thought from the other side. But this also was a winnowing year for people who were like, I'm out. This is too much. I can't do this anymore. So
Yeah. Yeah. So, so on the other side, I guess, what do you feel are some opportunities in the future?
I think it's a great time to begin having a real conversation about what it means to be in the profession that your association, it represents. For us, I've spent a lot of time this past year having conversations with our younger members and sort of trying to get a better understanding of what brought them into the organization and into the profession. And but also I've been doing a lot of outreach into trying to find out about people who maybe aren't involved, but they're clearly in the profession. So somebody who's working within the profession, but hasn't joined. Maybe they've shown up to some of our virtual events, and they've not joined. So we try to reach out to those folks and try to understand more about why are they not participating. And that's kind of what's driving sort of my opinion about this generational shift is, these people are doing a membership value calculation differently than Gen Xers and Boomers would normally do. And it's a bit, I would say it's a bit more brutalist in their approach. What do I get for these dollars, and what is the value back to me by doing this? So there's an opportunity, I think, for organizations to actually go out and exploit that and identify places for you to create value that maybe you're not currently, or to deliver it in a different way. And one thing that really helped us this year is with all of the changes we made, we were able to gain the attention of a far greater audience than we would have had we handled 2020 like any other year. And from that, we were able to get access to a lot of thinking in the people who participated in these things that we would have been close to. We wouldn't have known it was there. We would not have seen interests in these different nuanced areas of occupational medicine as being as strong or as important, or the perspectives weren't there. So I think there's an opportunity as we're rethinking what work is in the future, to rethink what people doing that work will need and get value from, and how those align with the broader missions and strategic goals of our organizations. And as long as we're able to have an open mind about where that might take us, I think most associations probably have an opportunity to develop some growth plans out of this, or to become a fresher, more vibrant organization. That requires some flexibility of thought that may be hard for folks sometimes, unfortunately. But for those that could get over that, every challenge is turned upside down. It's an opportunity. So, and this is no different.
Yeah, I know. I think everybody had to make a lot of changes quickly. What I'm hoping is that for a lot of these organizations, they don't kind of slip back into pre-pandemic, right? Because we were forced to do some things differently. We had a lot of flexibility or understanding from our boards and our members if we've made mistakes. And I hope that kind of continues, and we see that as an opportunity to try new things and see, as you said, kind of where our members or that new audience that we were able to attract, how do we service them and potentially service them differently. And I see that as kind of a big opportunity. But With that said, Bill, one of the things that I watched you do very quickly, everybody can say they pivoted to virtual meetings, but you did right away, and you have had a lot of success, and you kind of have done a lot over this past year. And fortunately, for those of you that don't know Bill has a very strong IT background. So you were able to actually, as a CEO, also do the work and help your team learn, right? So it was almost like you had the knowledge to be able to help with that transition quickly. But yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about that shift, and what are your plans at ACOEM for the future over the next year or two?
Yeah, I think you hit on an interesting point there. I think my technology background, more than helping in the moment, it sort of gave me a perspective that I think led into how the pandemic was. I feel a little guilty saying it, but it was pretty well timed for us. We had a lot of things coming online that made us more nimble in the moment where we needed to be nimble the most. As you know, I mean, we did a complete digital transformation. We replaced our almost our entire technology stack in the organization over the previous few years, and had gotten to the point where the majority of those systems were at a comfortable maturity and in full operational status. So we were able to leverage them immediately. At the end of 2019, we began an aggressive goal to do far more webinars and invested into all of the infrastructure we would need to be very quick about developing digital content, getting it out there, making sure that content was high quality and could provide real member value with it doesn't. So you have very clear audio quality, very good video where that's appropriate. Doing some post production on the recording, so it's not just we're doing more than just having a Zoom meeting. We were already doing that before all of this hit. So I think when we had that moment of okay, there's definitely something that's going to happen. And I remember it was in early January, I canceled a trip. I was going to go to India at the end of January for an international meeting. And at the time, there was a couple of reasons I canceled the trip, but one of them was definitely we were starting to see reports of the coronavirus coming out of China. And I personally didn't feel comfortable going because of where it looked like the shape of the epidemiology was going and the disease spread itself. So we stayed home, and that was kind of the beginning of all right, let's really start taking this seriously, because there's no way that this isn't going to become at least a major regional epidemic, if not a pandemic. We could see the writing on the wall at that point, and we began to track it. Once it was clearly going to happen, we began looking at what are the impacts of this for our organization. We had to think about our annual conference, of course, but also all of our operations and all of our events that we had planned for the year. In addition to our annual conference, we'd have normally 5 or 6 in-person training events that would be held here in our offices or other locations. So when we had to make the final decision, we had already done a lot of the preliminary thinking of how we were going to make decisions in this new environment that we saw coming. And we benefit, and I shouldn't take all the credit here. I need to give credit to our members. Our members, they work to protect the health and well-being of the American workforce. That's their main goal, is to keep workers safe and healthy. Occupational medicine is a profession that concerns itself with health problems that are due to work and work problems that are due to health. And so if you look at it that way, everything about an epidemic or a pandemic was tickling all of the things that our members are already aware of and concerned with. So we were able to be very nimble in the decision making as a result of a pandemic. It was well suited for us. And so we canceled our event. And once we made the decision and sort of triggered all of the processes that some of them are still ongoing, we were able to pivot and think, all right, well, we're not going to have an in-person event, but but until that point in time, we identified a program of content that we thought needed to be produced, and we looked to how can we capture this content? How do we not waste the intellectual effort that our members put into their profession over this previous year? And we made a tremendous effort to record those sessions, not as conference sessions, but as individual sessions that would be made available to our membership. And we were able to get about 45% of those sessions. And part of why we weren't able to get more is all of the remaining sessions involved people that were suddenly working 80-hour, 90-hour work weeks because of COVID-19 and the coronavirus hitting us in full force. But we also were able to very quickly look and say, all right, well, this huge thing is happening in the world, and we have a specific message that we need to get out. And so beginning June of last year, we started a series of virtual symposia. So a 3-ish day event where we take selected topics around the progression of COVID-19 and coronavirus and what we know about it and how we can get to that previous thing of concerning ourselves with the impact of work on health and health on work. And we're able to develop multiple events of curriculum around how to educate people about what's happening and what they need to be thinking about next. And those were tremendously successful. Our first virtual symposia, June of last year, we had several hundred people, and they had about 3.5 weeks to register. We had almost no notice by the time we pulled it together. We had the idea of this, planned how we were going to produce the content, get the content produced, and at the same time open registration and promote it. And we were blown away at how enthusiastically this was embraced. And the biggest surprise to us in that first one is that about 42% of the people who registered for it were non-members. They were, this was something that the entirety of medicine had decided that they wanted to get into. And we've seen about those numbers for the successive 2 virtual symposia. We did one in the fall and one this past winter as well. At the same time, because we had planned to do this, we went from an organization that 2 years ago did 0 to 1 webinar a year to an organization that now averages 2 to 3 a month. And so we ripped all of the band-aids off to get into digital production of this kind of content very quickly for a small organization. And have learned that as long as you're willing to inject things into your profession from the staff and society side, you're going to be rewarded with engagement from your members. And it's kind of obvious, but our organization was an organization, unfortunately, that had fallen out of that habit. And this was a way for it to rediscover that, which is great. So it was easy for us to pivot. We made the call to everybody work from home. We're not going to do this anymore. And because we had done the previous digital transformation, all of that paid for itself that moment because everybody just took their laptops and went home. Nobody needed a VPN. Everybody could do every part of their job anywhere on the planet. And this was the ultimate acid test of that theory, which for me, with my tech background, that actually felt good to have that all validated so completely. And that carried through with our ability to produce new products and events and focus on that. And really that pivot was for us to say, how can we increase our relevance and maintain our existing operations as much as is viable in this new environment as this is happening. And that was the approach we took. It was fantastic. We were very happy with the result.
So your last, I saw the social media from the last program that you guys just produced. And I saw people in the office and production, filming and all of that, which looked really cool. Can you kind of tell our audience a little bit of what that took and how you guys planned that meeting?
Yeah, you're talking about our annual conference, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Last summer, when we were looking at at sort of how things were unfolding with COVID, we made what was even then still a somewhat difficult decision of this is going to have to be a virtual event. We canceled in 2020. We couldn't cancel in 2021. We needed to have our annual conference. And a couple of things that we had to do to make that happen is we had to extend our proposal submission dates. Normally, we would do a very typical thing of requiring people to have those submissions in 8-9 months in advance of the meeting, so that we could do all the vetting, printing a pre-program, and getting everything done. We extended our deadline out to only 4 months before the event, and did a very compressed program development period at the end of that. But we intended for the event to be a really good virtual event by design from the beginning, to try to find the best mix of what it's going to cost us to produce and the overall positivity of the experience that we can provide to this event, which is not just content, but attempting to do things to sort of fill the networking gap for people who really do thrive on networking at events. And as we began that process, it was a survey of all of the virtual event platforms that were available and within a certain price range. I mean, there's some fantastic platforms out there that if you could drop $500,000 on, you'd be very happy with. We're not that organization.
yeah. Most aren't.
Yeah, and I think there's some side commentary about the predatory pricing and of some of those organizations that happened over this period of time. A lot of them really took advantage of they were in need, and thankfully, we didn't go with anybody who rushed into this industry because it was an opportunity. We went with people who had believed in sort of virtual conferences from the beginning, more because their client base was initially very international, and travel has always been a thing for folks who are international as our time zone. So once we had picked our platform and understood the production workflow with that platform, we began developing plans to sort of just fill in those holes. And so for us, we use SwapCard, which is actually the folks that you guys use. And I mean, that's not why we picked them, but when we were looking at all of the systems that are out there, all of the systems I really wanted to like a lot, and I had some strong bias in some directions going into this process. Once we started looking at those things and trying to put ourselves in the position of a late 50s, early 60s-year-old physician who expects something very different from an event, it became pretty obvious that these things that I thought were important were actually not, and that we needed to make a different decision. So our platform required us to have a production process that included capturing the sessions up front, which we did a mix of production methodologies. Some of our program needed a little bit more production value than what we could do through simple things. And so we use a product called OpenReel, where we send out basically a media kit that includes some easy to set up tripods and LED lights, and we use iPad minis for this, that allow us to do video direction remotely with VIPs. And so we would have a session where if there's a speech that needs to be given or a presentation that is sort of a keynote or a VIP presentation, we want to put them in the best light possible. We want to make them look good as professionals when they're presenting at our event, so that they are invested in the outcome. And this was a way that we could capture really high quality video of them without having to send a crew, and we could still let them do it wherever they want. Separately, we would for the most of our run-of-the-mill sessions, we would capture in Zoom, and I should probably write a blog post on how to get the best quality Zoom recordings, because there are some ways that you could get some excellent Zoom output if you use the right equipment, which isn't super expensive, and use the right settings so that somebody who's going to do post-production and video is going to be able to have something to work with other than one squished up video and audio file where everything is in just one place. Because that's great for slapping something quickly up on YouTube or a website, but it's terrible if you want to reflect a brand or a personality as well as you can. When we had the actual event, we had most of our sessions pre-recorded. We brought in an AV company to sort of help us with the quote unquote broadcasting of this. So for us, the event was a mix of playing back a live playing of the recorded content, and then at the end of that, we would transition into a Zoom experience between the faculty and the moderator to handle live Q&A that was coming in through SwapCard. And the people watching on SwapCard were able to type the questions in, chat with each other, and interact with the faculty in a way that really, there was a lot of engagement, a lot more than we expected. Tons of people, everybody figured out the chat box right away. Q&A box, most of them figured out. And by having people here at the office, if you look at those production photos, you'll see that we treated each of these sessions like they were in a room like you would in an actual event, and we had concurrent sessions. And so for each, however many concurrent sessions we have, that's how many room teams we had, and that would be an AV person and a staff person to help onboard the faculty as they're coming into the system, make sure that they're okay, get them through some quick AV checks. And this can all happen while their already produced video of the session is playing. They don't need to be there presenting right then in that moment, because we've already captured the session presentation in a way that is great and we're confident. So while their session is playing, we're making sure that they're comfortable with all of the things that we put in front of them to handle the Q&A, make sure that they're in the best position that they could be to be successful. And that meant that they were also very engaged in the platform and responding to Q&A, and were able to answer questions during their session while they were speaking. And just like we had with our first virtual event but last year, there were a number of people who realized on day one, day two, towards the end of the day, wait a minute, this isn't live, because it really did come together in a way that was convincing and authentic, which is important. Because of the way we did it, and because of the tools we used, all of those things were immediately available, in our case on Vimeo, as a recording of the session. So capturing the session recording was no longer an additional, level of effort. It just, by pumping it to Vimeo at the end of the session, that recording is done. Vimeo has the audio and video recording of that entire presentation that went through. We used a tool called Wirecast, which is more of a video production tool. And we're actually using it for our virtual symposium that starts tomorrow, in very much the same way. So everything that got sent into the platform for the event was captured as a unique video asset that has everything we need for it. And so that now becomes our enduring material. Right now, it's still in the virtual platform. But yeah, there's a lot. I know that was a very long answer, but there's a ton more that goes into producing an event like this. We had about 30 people in the office at the end. It was difficult to do this from trying to keep them socially distanced and have protocols for how we were actually going to do this. We set up our own stage, almost a real sound stage with professional video systems to capture the speeches that had to happen from here. We introduced a town hall, which is something we always have our annual membership meeting, but we introduced a town hall discussion with leadership that I monitored this year, which we handled the same way. And I think it all seemed to go very well. We had phenomenally good feedback, and in the end, if we look at this by any measure, we had more people register for the conference than we ever had. While it didn't produce the budget we had hoped for, there were some contributing factors for that. One, we wound up charging less than we budgeted. Two, we we were overly optimistic for the enthusiasm that we would have in May of 2021, based on our experience in June of 2020.
Yeah.
We failed to anticipate the lack of enthusiasm for virtual events for that point in time. So we had a little bit of a gap. It was, it wasn't enough to make it definitely was a successful event, just not quite as successful as we had hoped. And now that we're kind of recovering from it, the feedback has been almost universally amazing. We really are happy with the impression that we've given. And one of the things that I've heard a few of our members say in different ways is that they're surprised that an organization our size could do this, and and specifically that this organization could do this, because it was stuff that they're not accustomed to seeing ACOEM as an innovative organization that is able to keep up the stamina of putting new things out into the environment. And that event was the cherry on top of a year of learning how to do that well.
Yeah, that's terrific, Bill. So just to kind of close this up, I guess, what do you think is the most important thing that leaders can do right now to position their organizations for success?
Well, it seems kind of redundant, but I would say there's actually maybe three things that I would tell anybody. Hire people who are intellectually curious and open to change. If you have people who are, I don't think it takes courage, it takes confidence and a willingness to fail without consequence, to have an employee who can go in and experiment with a thing. Tomorrow I have people who have never done technical work in their career that are going to be producing an event using a major broadcast tool through a major streaming platform and a virtual event platform. None of them have any credentials that say that they have any business doing that, but they're going to do it, and it's going to be amazing because they all are the right kind of people to go out there and be excited to get to learn something that's new. None of them are it's not my job mentality type professionals, and all of them are able to learn. I think having the right team, in addition to the other things happening correctly for us, having the right people in the right place was essential. We couldn't have done it without certain members of our team. It would we would have fallen on our face. And so I think having the ability to hire the right kind of talent and the willingness to be challenged by your staff is essential. So I guess the other things I was going to say were, be open-minded and willing to change. But that's I'm saying all the same thing is to. The most important thing is to not assume that tomorrow will be the same as today. And even more importantly, not assume that you will be able to interact with tomorrow the way you interact with today. All of those have to be flexible all the time. And if you can do that and embrace that, which is hard, then you can find a way to be successful. Focus on what works and rather than what doesn't.
Yep, great. Well, thanks, Bill. It's been a great talking with you today. I really appreciate your time. I know you're really busy and headed into another virtual meeting. So I really appreciate the time that you've taken to share kind of your story and advice to the community. So just, I hope you enjoyed, those of you that are listening, enjoyed this episode and discovered tips and information that will add value to your leadership style and your association. I hope you enjoyed this episode and discovered tips and information that will add value to your leadership style and your association.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and discovered tips and information that will add value to your leadership style and your association. orgSource specializes in positioning teams for success with solutions for technology, strategy, and marketing. Please please contact us at info@orgsource.com or visit www.orgsource.com to find out how to keep your organization on track to Association 4.0.